Stephen Bali, Blacktown Mayor.
Thank you very much, and just I suppose want to get Jeremy up to speed. I know he's been involved in this campaign since February, but just like to let you know, Blacktown Council has actually conducted about 11 or 12 of these forums, right across the city of Blacktown, into Penwell Way, also here in Penrith previously. So we've been looking at this issue, this plus Badgerys Creek Airport, which is another disaster that... So as a lifelong resident of Western Sydney, obviously this has a major impact. Now, I'd like to thank obviously the speakers that we had before, Jane and Kerry, that outlined a lot of the issues, and I'm not going to go into each of the and stir people up to say what's so bad about it. You probably have heard me bang on about this, whether it's on radio, whether it's in the previous forums, but there's just a couple of things. When you have the EPA coming out and saying this proposal sucks, when you got the local area health board coming out and saying this proposal sucks, and you got Blacktown Council, which actually has spent many thousands of dollars, Jeremy. So yes, we don't have as deep pockets as some organisations, but we have actually engaged environmental scientists, and we're taking on this proposal. Now, mind you, for 2 years there, we've had a fairly open mind, because that's what's important for council. When there's a new proposal that comes up, we have to look at it in great detail, have a look at what's proposed, and then make an assessment. Obviously, for this assessment, we've come down after major assessment of it, looking at and getting expert advice, that this proposal does not stack up. To a large extent, I suppose, when you look at the first proposal, this is about 2 or 3 years in the making. If you look at the first EIS that was submitted, that showed a lot of the toxins and the furans and all those nasties that we've been talking about was a lot higher than the latest EIS. And part of the community consultation to help the company along, and I know Ian Maloof, I did see him earlier, and it's good to see him that he's come to this forum. We organised 2 forums, we organised one forum, and Penrith Council organised the other one here. We did one in Minchinbury, where his experts can come along and actually present to the community. So we letterbox dropped the area, got people out there, and I think something like 130 people attended. And I suppose my opening question to that part, which still stands unanswered, is that if the first EIS showed a whole heap of problems, and the second EIS suddenly says there's not that many problems or nothing that you need to worry about, don't look at this anymore, what has changed in the process? Has the process actually changed? Or is there improved technology, etc.? And so far the only answer that I can understandably get is that you just changed the consultants. You know, I suppose money, depending on what report, what type of environmentalist scientists you get to actually dissect the numbers, and this is all based on modelling. Modelling is all interpretive, and depending on what data you put in, gets you the answer. So from my perspective, I just really want to know the answer of why has there been a change in the amount of toxins that comes out. If it's dropped down and it's at safe levels, if that is true, then what's the change in the processes? So once again, I think to a large extent, looking at all the MPs that helped, I've got to say Chris Bowen's been, and the local MP, and he's here today, has played an astronomical role and support to myself. We've chatted on numerous occasions about this. And I think just to summarise one line from one of Chris Bowen's speech that he did in Parliament about this, if you think that the incinerator is the answer to a pollution problem, then you are asking the wrong question. And I think it's so important and sums up everything. As we've heard from the presentation, is the energy from waste incineration process the ideal process to have in Australia? From our perspective, obviously, is let's really focus on recycling, etc. Ed Husick was also got a classic comment in Parliament where he's saying, having grown up in Western Sydney, we've learned the hard way that it often takes ages to get the things we need, but super lightning fast speed to get the things that we don't want. And Emma Hussard's also been a rock and been able to liaise with her through this issue, and it's just my thanks to the federal MPs as well as all the state MPs, because we've had Hugh McDermott, John Robertson and Prue Carr leading the fight as well from a state perspective. Now, as far as where to in the future, so we've heard all the problems and all the challenges, and it's going through the process. Jeremy's put up a bill to Parliament, which sometimes we've got to be careful about playing too much politics. You know, by running around doing a forum and labelling a political party, I think doesn't add too much value in getting the whole community here to accelerate. All the forums I've run has been with community support and is for the community, by the community. I think that's the best way, rather than a political party trying to put their name to something to say that they were the first or last or they're the best or whatever. We are here for an issue for everybody. So with that in mind, you know, whether we knock over this proposal, and obviously the proponents have their ways of advocating and saying how good the proposal is, we'll be saying the challenges with the proposal. In the end, even if it falls over, and let's just say Jeremy's bill doesn't get up because the politicians will look at it and say, well, 15-kilometre radius, we haven't got facts and data. Our understanding of this industry in Australia is very limited. We don't have it here. It's around the world, yes. There's hundreds of plants around the world, but do you know that in England, before it started, there were parliamentary inquiries into the industry, why it's needed, how it interacts with the recycling industry, etc. Every single country that has allowed this technology in has had a parliamentary inquiry to test the hypothesis and to work out to what degree it's going to be acceptable in their particular countries. We haven't had any of this, and I'm happy to say that the upper house, the MLCs, led by Penny Sharp and Paul Green from the Christian Democrats, has actually allowed an upper house inquiry that has just been called last week to have a complete investigation into the energy from waste. I think if the benchmark, if this industry is deemed to happen in Australia, what we really need is actually the proper way of assessing it. If you look at the New South Wales standards, and Jane was talking about before, as far as the New South Wales standards and standards across Australia, we've not prepared for this. If you look at the emission targets of the Europe and US, etc., it's a lot lower, you know, as in minimising the emissions that comes out of it. Our standards don't match it. At very least, this inquiry, if it says that these plants should go ahead, it should be at world's best practice. Anyone who wants to build these things shouldn't, especially since we haven't got any of them, it must be the emissions at world's best practice, which is basically about 10% of what's allowable under New South Wales law now. It should be reduced. It still has hallmarks of problems with the nanoparticles and all that stuff, but this is where we can get involved as far as saying the sanctity of this process. The parliamentary inquiry, some just in basic, just roughly to wrap it up quickly, but need to know because submissions close on the 28th of May. So the submissions is just open, you got to the 28th of May. I've talked about the emission qualities, but there's other angles that we should be looking at. So instead of just purely looking at emissions, we should have actually regulations as far as the proprietorship and management of this place. So if there's any change in proprietorship, any change in management, and they aren't up to standard, then they shouldn't be given the permission to have the licence for it. If there's any questions about the proprietors, I'm not picking on this particular plant, any plant across Australia, across New South Wales, if someone's had some type of problem with the EPA, then therefore they should not be allowed to run an energy from waste plant, because we're talking about hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion worth of investment, and you've got to have a clean record. So we've heard about the recycling targets. The classic thing about these things is when you build an energy from waste plant, it has to operate at a constant speed. Constantly going. It's feed the beast. You can't tweak it down and turn it off for a couple of hours here or there. You can't overly run it. If the temperature gets too high, maybe that will impact on the operating conditions of the plant. When the conditions of the plant changes as far as the heat's concerned or the type of material goes in there, that's where the toxins rise. That's where you get the spike. When they're measuring these toxins, it's usually over an average of the 24-hour cycle, not the spikes. And we've seen that, I've seen that in Europe around the place. What we need to make sure that as far as these things are concerned, if having a 1.1, I think that's the latest one, it used to be 1.3 million tonnes, I believe the proponents have now changed it to 1.1 million tonnes, which is effectively, and not that they're proposing at the moment, but just to get into your mind the size of this thing, that means about 80-85% of all household rubbish in the Sydney Basin could actually go through this thing. I know they're not asking for residential waste at the moment, but at the moment it's just looking at commercial waste. But that's how big this thing is. Imagine 85% of the entire waste of us can go through that thing. So essentially, if you've got this large incinerator operating there, regardless of all the safeguards and safety, etc., what chance has recycling got? Absolutely none. I'd be proud to say right across Western Sydney, and we should be clapping this in a second to give you a warm up of your hands. In Western Sydney, actually between about 61% through to 69%, Liverpool Council's on 69, Blacktown's at 63, not too sure where Fairfield, Ben Price might tell me where Fairfield's up, Penrith Council's up to, but Western Sydney recycles about over 60% of its waste. Yeah, I just got someone saying Mosman's one of the worst. I actually heard, and look, don't quote me on this, I know video cameras are going left, right and centre, but I do believe that I did see a presentation where I believe Randwick Council was about 35-40%, and you think, yeah, eastern suburbs had to go at us being Neanderthals, hey? Who's the real Neanderthals out there? So, but anyway, they got curfew on their airport, don't they? We don't. So essentially, if we want, and Europe actually has a benchmark, I think it's 63% at the moment. Wales is actually increasing their benchmark by 2% per annum, and we've heard about the presentation of the closed loop economy. If you're going to have one of the world's largest incinerators here, what chance has recycling got? So as far as I'm concerned, we need to have in the rules incorporated planned obsolescence. These things are built in a modular fashion, so you can actually shut down a module and about a quarter of the plant can then be reduced over time. If we believe in recycling and we are aiming for a closed loop economy as far as recycling everything, and that's where the world's heading towards, then we need, if this is going to be approved and it's just right and fair for the proprietors to know right at the beginning what are the rules. They should be able to know that in 10 or 15 years it must be shut down, module by module and be reduced. So that's another element. Improvements in technology. Two more quick points. Improvements in technology. If you, for instance, if this was built in the 1950s or 60s, when you didn't need fire alarms, I'm looking for a fire alarm, I can't find one. Obviously in the year 2000 there's one. Oh, great, one. Oh, above my head, so I'm safe. When this place gets too hot. If there's a fire, the fire alarms have changed. Every new building now needs fire alarms. Do you know when they changed the rules means that it's not retrospective? So whatever the rules are for this new plant, they can run with that forever and a day. Hence why I'm saying world's best practice needs to be instilled. And what we need is actually in these rules that they know that every 10 years or 5 years or whatever it might be, market back to market. If there's any changes in technology that makes it more safe and reduces the emissions, then that must be incorporated into any future plant that's running, and it should be improved over time. I don't want to sound like I'm in favour of these things, but I'm just trying to be a realist. If we don't have the numbers in Parliament, we need to make sure that we get the best possible outcome for us. So we need the rules that way anyone who's doing their business plan will realise, well, you'd be better off looking at something else. And finally, the monitoring. The EPA, they're a great organisation, but they're restricted and limited on staff, and how many people they can send out there. I think there needs to be some type of cost sharing where there's the local council being the local authority in the local area, knowing what the locals want, that we actually have some role in assessing and monitoring and following it up. And as far as monitoring is concerned, and it does happen in some of the plants around Europe, that you actually have online monitoring of these things so that anyone in the public can just Google it up and see what the emission levels are for this place. So in the end, I've more talked about where are we going into the future. I believe, from my personal perspective and from the advice I've received, that this proposal ought to fail. Any reasonable government assessment of it hopefully will result in its failure, but I don't control that, as we heard about that before. But what we need to make sure, just because it fails, that what we have is the benchmark and the rules to save our community and keep our community safe into the future. Thank you very much.